right, hello again, everyone who has stayed with us throughout the morning and into the afternoon. We're almost to the end. This is our last presentation for the day, so I want to thank you in advance for sticking around with us. Now it's my pleasure to introduce Rethinking Roles and Relationships of Library Professionals. As more universities incorporate new technologies into teaching and learning, there is an increasing demand for technological and instructional support for faculty and students. Libraries are uniquely situated to meet those needs and to find creative ways to embed themselves into academic curriculum. These evolving expectations are leading libraries to rearrange their organizations, resulting in the creation of new departments, new positions, and new responsibilities for library professionals. Now, going to kick it off by sending it to Holly Ludgate, who's going to moderate this discussion. Take it away, Holly.
Thank you very much. Just to add on to that, while these roles are being created, there's a clear hiring trend that's emphasizing more of these functional specialists to have strong digital or technology backgrounds. And in these libraries, they're approaching many different directions to fulfill more specialized capacities. In this session, we're going to explore the different skill sets required for these professionals and how they can collaborate with different university departments, local libraries, and other groups to really meet the ever-changing needs of the institutions that they're at and their patrons. So, thinking about the main topic, Rethinking Roles and Relationships of Librarians, this focuses on 4 areas that were actually featured within the report: embedding academic and research libraries in the curriculum, embracing a need for radical change, the rise of new forms of multidisciplinary research, and maintaining ongoing integration, interoperability, and collaborative projects. And I'm really excited today with our panel that we have. We've got an expert panel that's really dug deep into this and I think is going to bring some great insight. So what I'm going to do is kick it off to our first panelist and ask him to introduce himself and then also answer the question of how their institution or how his institution is rethinking the roles of the relationships of librarians. So I'm going to kick it off to David Parks, the National Teaching Fellow and Associate Director of Information Services at Staffordshire University.
Thanks, Holly. Well, great introduction. And listening to the rest of the symposium earlier today, I've just been fascinated by the breadth and depth of work that everyone in libraries is involved in. And what an enormous task we've got ahead of us, haven't we? It's absolutely amazing. Someone earlier mentioned, I think it's Geneva, mentioned that it's probably the most exciting time to be a librarian. And I think it is. I used to think that maybe 20 years in the future or 20 years ago might have been the best time to be a librarian, but actually I think it's about now. And I'm Dave Parks, as you said. I'm the university librarian at Staffordshire University. Really, I came through this from, I used to work at Westchester University in Pennsylvania, near Philly, and that was really where I learned my craft. That was where I honed my skills and really saw the potential of what librarianship could be. Subsequently moved on to lots of other jobs, but now I'm a librarian, but I'm also the head of learning technology at the university. So I look after both sides and I see how staff in both areas, professionals in both areas, both librarians and learning technologists, are actually sort of starting to merge and starting to sort of bleed over into each other's areas. And that's a really fascinating and exciting thing to watch. My role really is to make that happen. Technology is imbued everywhere with what we do in the university, increasingly mobile, increasingly classroom-based technologies, new things like immersive technologies and immersive labs and all of that kind of thing. And librarians are right at the forefront of that, or should be. We're very much generalists in many ways. People that come to us for all kinds of things, but we're also specialists in our craft as well. And the challenge is, I think, how to maintain that relevance when there is so much for us to do and so much for us to achieve. And I think that's the real challenge that faces us. We're currently looking at all of our roles of librarians. We're looking at the skills that librarians need moving forwards. looking at the skills that learning technologists need moving forward. So we're seeing lots of crossover there. What we're doing with the librarians in particular is asking them to map their own skill set against a given criteria that includes elements from their job description, from the way that they work now, but also about the way that they'll work in the future. So they're mapping their skills, they're scoring them from a 1 to 5. 5 is I'm an expert, 1 is I need to learn some more here. And so they're working together on that. They're sharing ideas, they're talking to each other about where they should be scored. They're talking to their managers and talking to people around them about how they think and they perceive them on their skill level. And then it establishes a way for us to move forwards, for them to begin to climb up that scale up to 5, not necessarily for everything, but certainly to develop skills in all of those areas. And I'll talk about that a bit later on, but that's it for now. Thanks, Ollie.
That was fantastic, and I definitely think that that's one area that a lot of departments can learn from, is really doing that pre-assessment when you first start to know where to go to. So I'm really excited to dig a bit deeper into that today. And thanks for kicking us off. And let's move next on to Franziska Regner, for the Head of Innovation and Development at ETH Zurich.
Hello, yes. Unfortunately, nobody's able to see me, but I will try to just make enough noise to be listened to. Yes, as you said, I'm head of the division Innovation and Development at the Swiss Federal Institute of Technology in Zurich, at the library there, the so-called ETH library. And I started to work for this institution in May this year, and that was the time when the new Department for Innovation and Development was just founded. So right now we are in the process of somehow building up and also shaping the new department. Of course, there was innovation management in the library before, but now we have the opportunity to create a new room and creativity to allow for innovative approaches, and also to allow for an atmosphere of creativity, I would say. And actually, I would like to quote Lambert Heller, who was on the panel just before our panel discussion. He presented a so-called lab environment at his institution, and elaborated a bit on the need for a room of creating space and a room for experimentation. And I think that's crucial for libraries in order to get in touch with new needs of their users, both in research and in student environments. And I'm quite interested in all these topics related to radical change in libraries, how to face the challenge to be and live somehow in a very structured organization such as a university or a library with its operational business, and on the other hand allowing for innovation management and all the topics related to that.
Wonderful. Well, your voice and the content you're bringing forward certainly does come through, even though your video does not. Thank you. And moving right along, we have Paul Signorelli, a writer, trainer. I could really go on the list. Goes forever. He does so many wonderful things, especially working with the NMC as well. Writer, trainer, instructional designer, presenter, social media strategist, consultant. Works with Paul Signorelli and Associates. And so the question for you is to give us a brief background, and then also where you work, what are the roles and relationships, and what are they rethinking for librarians?
Well, I think the other two panelists already said all the good stuff, so I would go home, except that I am already home. And as much as that is a joke, it really reflects a lot about the state of librarianship and what we're rethinking these days. We aren't any longer, it's clear to all of us, we're no longer tied to physical buildings. People come to us in our buildings, but we also go to them in their communities. Sometimes we do the traditional thing of going out and seeing them there physically. Many, many times, as we're doing today, we go out to people virtually. So one of the things we need to be thinking about is our ability to work as well face-to-face as we do online. It's not an either-or thing anymore, and that's affecting the way we work. It's affecting the way people have expectations of us, and really I think it's very exciting. What Dave said earlier about having that 1 to 5 scale where 1 was need to learn more, I think that's a new definition of librarianship. We're always 1. We always need to learn more.
Excellent insight. Thank you so much, Paul. And so to really start kicking off this conversation, one of the hard-hitting questions from the library report was, why is this important for teaching and learning? And so really the bottom line is, it's not the case that librarians sit behind the desk and wait for people to come so that the librarians can share what they know, but it's the librarians going where people need them and really being that facilitator in the learning process. And so I would love to hear your insights on that. Anybody'd like to start us out?
Yeah, I'll kick off. We expect a lot from librarians, don't we, really? They support scholarship, and then we expect them to be scholars themselves. They support learners, and we expect them to be learners themselves as well. And this is a real challenge. The world has moved so rapidly forwards that it's meant that some librarians feel cast adrift. Some are questioning what they do. And I think it's the opportunity now, as Paul said, is for that to make that online presence really felt. Earlier, talking about mobile, for example, is a great opportunity for us to do that. I was making a list earlier of the kinds of things that librarians should be, you know, and I was making this list is now at 26 points. I'll post these up later, but we need to be, you know, technical evangelists. We need to be leaders. We need to demonstrate that ethical side of what we do as well, the ethical role in terms of what that means on the web for students and for staff. We need to be curious, we need to be entrepreneurs, we need to be bold, we need to be listeners and builders and coders. You know, we need to really grasp this sort of thing, and it's there now for us to do that. People are looking for us to do it. Even though we know that there are non-users and lots of non-users of our services in universities, we know that those that do touch us, that do reach us, are very, very surprised and very, very satisfied with our services. And that's where we must pursue, and also capture the non-users too.
I think it's interesting, that list of 26, and one of them just happens to be coders. And I could say when I went through my master's in educational technology, we had to take some courses in library science, and that was never in our list of things. And so it's interesting how the role is really evolving for librarians into new, interesting spaces that really make it much more general but much more exciting in a very specialized way. How about you, Franziska? What do you think about the importance of teaching and learning with this?
Well, teaching and learning, and I completely agree with what Dave just said, is just key for all our fields. And I would also refer to one explicit remark Dave made. He mentioned listening is quite important, and I believe that this is a highly important area where we need to put lots of energy into, listen to people on the one hand and talk to them on the other hand, and that demands for good networks with your users and potential new users. For the library I work in, as for many others as well, social media plays an important role in that field. But still there are challenges. There's always a gap between some user groups and our librarians or IT experts working in the library. However, I believe that there is good progress in that field, and the awareness of a broad set of qualifications within librarians, people who have a background in research and teaching, this is quite important. But on the other hand, having people with a strong technological background and bringing all this together refers very much on the current needs in teaching and learning. One aspect that I would like to mention as well, especially with the high potential of IT expertise in our institutions, it is crucial, in my opinion, to also bring in a critical and reflective mind and also atmosphere and strategy to allow for this radical change, because there are topics such as data privacy or data security topics that are not explicitly mentioned in the Horizon report, but which could be of high relevance for our institutions as well.
Very interesting. Thank you. Thank you for that insight. Paul, what about you? What are your thoughts on this importance for teaching and learning?
Oh, I think that it's indisputable at this point that librarians and all members of library staff are part of the teaching, training, learning cycle that goes on. We can't even differentiate them by saying we're trainers or we're teachers. We're learning as much as we're teaching. We're all co-learners, as the phrase goes in one of the massive online open courses that I'm exploring right now on the whole subject. So we need to recognize that, and I think we are getting better at recognizing it. You look at what the American Library Association does with its current mission statement. 10 years ago, we would have seen mission statements, including theirs, saying things along the lines of we're supporting reading and the joys of reading in our community. And now we're expanding that to acknowledge right out there that learning is part of our process and lifelong learning is going to be our métier. It always has been in many ways, but we're getting more vocal and explicit about it. Holly, you yourself pointed out a very interesting aspect of this when you talked about getting your instructional design degree and taking librarian courses, librarianship courses. I did the same thing a few years back when I got my MLIS through the wonderful program at the University of North Texas. I spent as much time looking at online learning techniques and documenting those as I did looking at other aspects of librarianship. I'm really glad I did. It served me well, and I think it serves the people that I work with very well.
You know, you brought up a really good point, and that is the difference of past to today. Would any of you like to comment on maybe even what it looked like as a librarian 5 years ago to today? Or, you know, we could go back even 10 years. Could any of you make a quick comparison for us on how the role has really changed?
I'm one of those weird people in libraries in the sense that when I first started working in them, I didn't come in with a librarian degree. I came in with a real love of libraries. I was hired in to run the library's volunteer program here in San Francisco. The job expanded. I became the training director as well as the library volunteer director, and ultimately moved out on my own so that I could work with larger organizations as well as small ones across the country, get involved with things like New Media Consortium, but always keeping my hands in with my colleagues in libraries. So I've been seeing the roles evolve. I remember discussions about, oh, we shouldn't move on to online resources, that there were a lot of people that really didn't want to see computers come into libraries back in the 90s when I first got involved. And now people would look at you as if you were crazy, and you would be crazy to suggest something like that. So we're responding to the changing needs of library users, library members, whatever we want to call them, and to the requirements of our own profession. As Dave said, there's an exhausting but fascinating and fabulous laundry list of things we do. And the more we embrace that without killing ourselves and find out what's most important and most consistent across all that we do, the better off we're going to be, and the people relying on us are going to be.
Absolutely right. I think, Dave, did you have a comment you wanted to add to this?
I was just thinking about sort of my comment at the start about 20 years ago, you know, when libraries were just print, and that was what we did. We managed our collections, we curated them, and made them as accessible as we could. And just to think of that journey, just those few short years, I started in librarianship probably about 20 years ago as a shelver. I was just there for the summer, you know, and never got out. But it's kind of been such a journey in terms of we're moving from that huge print collection to try and make our electronic collections accessible. And we've talked about all the things about digital rights management and the restrictions based on authentication and all of that kind of thing. And we are in danger, I think, still thinking of our electronic collections like our print collections. And I don't think we've fully made that journey. We need lots more advocacy, as I think someone was mentioning in the previous session as well. And we need to rethink really how we package and provide our content. But of course, it's not just about content. It's not just about what you've got in a library. It's about what you do with that content. And that's where the librarians I've always been adaptive, I've always been inventive, I've always been thought of novel ways of actually, encapsulating all of this change and churn. And I think, we were the first people to start using microfiche and microfilm and all that kind of stuff. And, we're not scared of new technologies. This one is a little more complex and it needs a little more thinking about. But that's the task ahead, and that's, we're in a good place to start doing that.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, you all have said the role of the librarian has really evolved, and it is going in new and exciting places, and that's been evident in all the panels today. Franziska, did you have something you'd like to add?
Yes, actually, however, despite of the fact that I have only started to work in the library business about 5 years ago, I realized that the pace is probably faster than it used to be. However, we are still information specialists, and that is the continuing aspect in libraries, I believe. Information is more complex today as it was before in the digital context. In our library, for example, research data and research data management, as well as digital long-term preservation, play a crucial role, and this poses relevant challenges to institutions, and this is just one field of several other fields where there is a broader field of topics, a broader field of challenges, but there is continuing elements as well, in my view.
Absolutely, you're absolutely right. And so this actually moves me into the next question, which I think just beautifully flows. What kind of organizational change do these initiatives require when we're thinking about teaching and learning, when we're thinking about the new roles of the librarian? What do we need to see organizationally? The challenges, the radical attitude changes. What are some of these?
Wow, that's a great question. I think in terms of faculty and librarians, again, there's a merge between roles there. We practice a kind of what we call an interstitial approach, where librarians will come into classrooms, for example, at critical junctures of the curriculum. So it might be at the start of a module or an award, and then at critical times around assessment times or around assignment times, or just to come in and demonstrate some searching techniques at critical times around certain subjects or disciplines that the students are studying. And that works quite well, and that's a joint teaching approach. It's a joint approach to how the course is delivered, how students engage with and see librarians as part of faculty as well. And that's a really fascinating thing. That's going into the classroom, into the places where they are, but also into the virtual places where they are. So we use Blackboard as our learning management system, and having a presence there too. Being everywhere where faculty are is absolutely essential for us now. So that's one way, breaking down that kind of barrier of the building as place. But also on the other side is learning technology side as well, which I look after that side at the institution, and again they've got a vital role in doing this. And I think joining that sort of iron triangle together of faculty, learning technologies, and librarians, triangles are very strong, and that's a really great thing to actually build on. By breaking down those, thinking interdisciplinary, thinking cross-institutionally, and cross-discipline is the way that we need to go in this.
And what a shift that is from 15, 20 years ago, where we would all go to the library and gather the information. And it actually lends back to the earlier conversation about you guys going out and working with everyone. That's a great point. Paul, do we want to volley it over to you? What are your thoughts on organizational change?
Organizational change, I keep coming back to somebody I really admire, which is our David Lanke's who did the Atlas of New Librarianship, and he talks over and over again of the radical nature of what we do, but not just radical the way we traditionally think of it as that wild screaming group out there that we wish would go away. David, in a presentation earlier this year, had a jokey title. I think it was called The Faithful and the Radicals in Libraries, joked about how it was almost a title of a movie, and yet for him, the radical nature of what we do is radical in the foundational sense. We have our roots in certain things. We build upon that. It is also radical in that it shakes things up. And among the people being shaken up are librarians themselves, ourselves, those of us who work in the libraries. So if we're looking for a stable environment that is the same that we all grew up in and we want it to be that way, we're in the wrong profession. It hasn't been that way for a long, long time, and I don't think it's going to be that way. So the organizations have to support that. Of course, it comes back to what I think. What I work on so much, training, learning, education, the whole teaching thing, that's essential for us. We have to be learning and then turning around and working. And the exciting thing we see is we don't have to know it all. When we step into a makerspace, the learners with us, our co-learners, are teaching us as we're teaching them. We don't have to master every bit of technology. That's why we read our colleagues' blogs. That's why we come to NMC and attend these kind of sessions. We're consistently learning so we can better serve people. And if our organizations support that, I think we're going to do very well.
Hear, hear. I'm on board. What about you?
Yay!
What do you think?
Well, actually, what Paul just said about makerspaces is one aspect that I would like to talk about to allow for room to get in touch with different groups of people, be it students, be it researchers, and from different disciplines is one aspect that is very important in my view. However, you need, on the one hand, you need room and capacity to do so, and on the other hand, you need resources to also implement what you learned in all these different environments, and somehow integrate these insights into your own organization. Another example that might see it here are completely different structures or completely different organizational forms or events that librarians can also attend and get in touch with people who bring completely different and also innovative approaches which we can learn from. And referring to my own background and the current situation that I'm in, I can very clearly say that the opportunity to have, be it a department or be it a group of people, having room and capacity for creative intercourse with different people and also new forms of technology is key in my view, but it is challenging, as I said in the beginning.
You know, you actually brought up a great point, and this goes back to Samantha's comment at the end of the panel from last time. It was how she was very surprised and excited about the creative movement happening within the library space and the openness to try new things and to have a creative outlet. So I'm actually wondering, anybody on this panel have a makerspace within their library or know of a couple libraries that have incorporated some makerspaces in there? And if so, what do they look like? What do they have in them?
We don't have a makerspace. We have something called an iLab, which is essentially pointing at innovative new technologies and allowing people to get their hands on them. We beg, borrow, and steal things to populate this space with, and people can come in, use this technology, share their ideas about how it might be used, just get their hands on it. For example, we've been playing with Google Glass in these spaces, and just seeing what people do with those technologies, it gives us clues about how people learn. Ourselves, we're learning as well at the same time in playing around with those things. But I've seen the makerspaces pop up, and it's certainly on my list for something to do for the next development of our spaces. Absolutely. I'd love to hear more if anyone else knows.
That's interesting that you're kind of looking at how the users are utilizing these technologies so it can help inform what you're doing in the library. So I love that. Very interesting. Paul, what about you?
Oh God, I wish we had 4 or 5 hours to talk about makerspaces and learning spaces. I've not been in a library and actually worked in a makerspace, but I've been following them a lot, trying to see what they're doing. And here in San Francisco, I believe we're about to see one in the main library. Mm-hmm. It's a seminal part of what we're discussing today. The spaces define and redefine the work we're doing, and we have to, and we enjoy those opportunities to see what the new space does in terms of how we learn, how we share information, how we work with others. Tom Hames did a wonderful thing at the New Media Consortium Summer Conference where he talked about idea spaces and what that meant to the learning process and to libraries in general and to the school that he works at. Everybody that was there, we had these wonderful conversations about what are we becoming. And I go back to Dave Lankas, who says, he probably says this more eloquently than I do, but if libraries aren't makerspaces, they're not doing it right. And that doesn't mean you just put technology in. People come in, they use the collections, they create. It's wonderful. It really is affecting how we do things.
Yeah, yes. I love that. I love it, Paul. What about you, Franziska? I know you started the conversation of makerspaces. Are you seeing makerspaces where you're at more frequently?
Well, not that frequently, and actually we do not have a makerspace at our institution. However, I know libraries in Germany and in Europe who do have at least temporary makerspaces. And in my view, it's one way of going out and making the library visible, get in touch with people, and maybe that leads me to a general remark. In a broader context, in my view, the topic about rethinking roles and relationships of librarians in many cases relates to a tension between being invisible as a library on the one hand, which means providing services that are quite seamless and that everyone can use even without noticing that it's provided by the library. But on the other hand, finding positions and places where you want to become visible, even in situations where people would not expect a library to be active in. And this is quite a fruitful field that we can work in and that we can experiment in my view.
That's fascinating. When you were talking about how you guys have temporary makerspaces, it made me almost think about collections coming in and out of your museum, like a rotating collection. So kind of like a rotating museum coming into the library space. I love that. It's very interesting. We have a question that came from the audience from Kimberly. She had asked about some of your favorite blogs or resources that you use to stay current. If you could just mention a few, any of you, and then we can certainly type them into the chat so they've got those resources. Paul, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. There are so many. Again, it's just you have to go out and you decide which voices are speaking to you most clearly now, and you don't always follow the same ones. But I pretty consistently follow Sarah Houghton's Librarian in Black blog. It's gone from being a tech blog to being something where she talks about management issues at a very open and honest level. I love that. It's a great use of social media. I love the Unquiet Librarian, Buffy Hamilton. She's somebody that I've worked with before, and I just love what she's doing with virtual spaces as well as real spaces in high school settings. I look at a lot of people outside of libraries, and that's something that my favorite library colleagues recommend. And we don't just read each other. We see what's coming from other places. Of course, self-plug. I love being part of the New Media Consortium blog. I think there are amazing things happening there. I'm so glad that I get to be part of that. So the basic overriding thing here is keep looking for those voices that complement what you do, as well as disagree with what you do, so that you open yourself up to what's happening out in the field. That's how I keep fresh.
Good insight, Paul. Thank you. What about you, Dave?
Yeah, absolutely agree with that. Look outside the world. If you always look for library solutions, you'll always get library solutions. You know what I mean? You need to sort of look beyond, see what's emerging, what people are doing that's exciting. The Gartner stuff is interesting. What's happening in industry as well, but also what's happening out there on the edges. The sort of different approaches. I'm a big psychogeographer. I do lots in psychogeography, and I'm writing at the moment about the psychogeography of libraries, how libraries impact upon the emotions and behaviour of people when they use our spaces, both virtual and bricks. But so I read lots of cultural blogs as well, and there's lots of fascinating stuff out there in the art world, how the arts world has embraced technology and doing amazing things with it. Everything from video casting to, you know, sort of incredible electronic installations, which again can fit into libraries as well. Museums too, and the NMC report on museums is really fascinating and provides a way. But really, I get most of my information from the NMC.
Oh, I love this panel. Plug in the NMC.
Of course.
What about you, Francisca? What are some of your go-to resources you might want to share?
Well, actually, I have trouble recommending blogs in English, since most of the blogs I just realized that I frequently read are in German, but maybe I can provide some general recommendation. I believe, as the others said as well, that outside the library sphere there are lots of interesting information resources such as blogs. For example, in the broader field of innovation management of startups and their organizations. I also believe that the sphere of museums and archives is quite interesting, and for our context, there are lots of blogs relating to electronic publishing and academic publishing, which is important for us as libraries as well. And last but not least, I would like to mention that at least in Europe, referring to blogs that I'm aware of, lots of libraries just recently or a bit longer ago started to publish their own blogs with quite innovative formats and innovative contents. We ourselves have a blog called ETH Innovation Blog, and what we refer to is not only our own library, but also broader topics and technologies that are interesting for the field of libraries.
Wonderful. And I want to thank all of you. What was exciting to me is to hear all of your resources don't strictly focus within the library realm. They really do expand beyond. And I think that just goes to show the creative librarians out there that you guys are really looking at all places to gain insight to help inform what you do. And everybody benefits from that. So I want to actually take this conversation to the next question. And it's really about the new skills required for the library of the future. What are they?
I make a lot of lists. I did make a list before we started, so I'll read some of these out. I don't know if they make any sense actually, but bear with me, see what you think. Cross-cultural skills, I figure, are going to be really important. You know, we need to be able to. And I mean culturally around technologies. We need to be able to have digital fluency in using technology appropriately. It's not just the technology. It's about the ethos and the use in terms of speaking to humans and talking to other human people about what we're doing. A great idea of sense making. You know, making sense of very complex flows of information and data that come in, and helping people to make sense, but also the skills that we need in making sense of all of this churn, this massive sort of challenge that we face. To be adaptive, to be, you know, agile, not fazed by this stuff, but, you know, dive into this stuff, being able to experiment, being able to have the time and the will to actually have fun out there as well. What else to say? Design. We need to be designers too, as well as coders. We're setting a lot of challenges out for librarians, but we also need to be designers, and we need to have a design mindset. You know, in terms of graphic design, and how we build our web interfaces, but also in terms of how we understand the geography of our learning spaces and learning spaces beyond, because our libraries now are classrooms, teaching rooms, gardens, foyers, buildings. You know, they can be anywhere, and the library is omnipresent in that sense. And we need to really think about that and about how we can design those spaces or contribute to that design. And I guess another one would be new media literacy. You know, that we need to have that and grasp that too.
Great list, Dave. I'm not sure I could ever get hired, but it's a good list. Francisco, what about you?
Well, the list was quite long, and what I like was your term digital fluency, Dave. That's yeah, that's very well said, as I believe. One aspect that, if I'm not mistaken, has not been mentioned by Dave yet, is the whole marketing area. That's something which is also quite important in my view, since we have quite elaborate services and lots of sets of services. The marketing aspect is of key importance in my view, at least. We need to communicate our services. Marketing them to also get in touch with the users and make them aware of it. Another field that I would like to add, and it's really an addition because I completely agree what Dave said before, is the ability to allow for a way of or a form of dynamic management forms which correspond to the radical change that we need to approach. And last but not least, this is not a new skill which is needed, but which is becoming ever more important in my view, is to be well integrated in the university structure as such, and make the management of universities aware of what libraries do, what they provide, inform about the expertise in these fields. Yeah, that's something I would like to state as well.
Fantastic, thank you. I thought you brought some great ideas up. And then what about you, Paul? I know we're getting close on time, but I definitely want to hear what you have to say.
Well, this is an amazing thing. I was making my own handwritten list here with my fountain pen and was amazed to find that I had exactly the same thing Dave said and much of what Francisco said, so I can really keep this brief. Joking aside on this, we have so much that we need to know and so much that we need to learn. There is that whole thing of digital literacy, defining it as well as figuring out how to implement it. But I think it comes back to, regardless of what tools we use and what resources we have, our strongest strength is our ability to collaborate. If we collaborate with others, it makes our own learning curve that much easier. If we collaborate with others, it makes our ability to serve others so much stronger. That's why I appreciate what we're doing with this kind of virtual symposium and what we do face-to-face when we gather. We learn from each other. That is one of the best skills that we can develop and pass on to others.
You know, the only thing that I would maybe add is celebrating failure.
I'm ready.
Only because I think that that's a really important part of the learning process, is learning how to fail and getting back up, and you know, it's part of the experimentation process, and I know a lot of you mentioned that. Yes. So unfortunately we have reached the end of our time, and I feel like we've barely scratched the surface, but I do want to see if there's any closing remarks from any of you before we do an outro to this entire event. Would anybody like to give their comments? Dave, do you have anything you'd like to say?
Just, I guess in summary, just to keep capturing, keep developing, keep deploying, and sustain this change. You know, keep it going. And librarians will do that, I know. And let's collaborate, as Paul said. What a great way of ending that. So I can't beat that one, actually. So that's me signing off.
Fantastic. Thank you, Dave. What about you, Francisca?
Well, my final remark would be that being open on the one hand is key, and events such as this one or the continuance of the Horizon report are just important platforms, in my view, to be open and discuss openness, but listening and also they're looking deeply into structures that we are facing is the other side of the coin, in my view.
Excellent, thank you. And last but certainly not least, we got Paul.
I will try not to be least. I think that if we walk away with any word, it's the word that's right in the title here, rethinking. Rethinking is one of the best interactions, one of the best activities we can engage in. It's essential in the kind of world we live in. We never stop learning, but learning doesn't have to be an awful thing. It should be as pleasurable, as rewarding, as stimulating, and as exciting to all of us as we found from our best instructors. So I hope that's what we keep doing, rethinking and learning from the best people around us.
Thank you, Paul. And I want to thank this entire panel. You really were just so fantastic and spot on and really thinking about what the new roles are for librarians and staff. And I think that you hit on some excellent points today that I'm hoping we can continue the conversation in the future. And I know that the Horizon Report is really supporting a lot of the words and the work that you are doing. So I'd like to take a few minutes to close out our event today. And wow, what an event it was. I've just been blown away at the conversations that have been happening today in our panel discussions. I did take down many notes, so to summarize in just a few, disconnect the possibilities to what is actually, there's a big disconnect of what's actually happening to what the possibilities are, and that's something that everybody is trying to work on. And thinking about ways to engage students and the faculty in creative ways is something you also are thinking about. And then also that maker idea, a creativity and space and room for experimentation. A lot of you are pushing for that, and you are open to that, which is an exciting thing. One of the things that I think was really telling to us is that the Horizon Report for the Library Edition in 2014 had over 1 million downloads in 8 days. And that told us at the NMC that there is a critical need for more information in this space, and you guys are ready for it. So it was a natural fit to have this symposium for all of you fine people involved within the library space. And we're just really excited that you took the time today to join us for this professional development. So on behalf of the New Media Consortium and the Learning Revolution, I really want to thank our moderators and panelists today. Participants, if you want more information on anything you saw or heard, you can contact me directly at holly@nmc.org. And if you want to get involved in our community, you can visit our website at nmc.org. Like us on Facebook and friend us on Twitter. I know some of you are not NMC members, and we'd love for you to think about joining the community to keep this conversation going in many capacities. This archive will also be available soon. I know some of you expressed interest in wanting to view this afterwards. The chat will be archived, as well as all of the panels, so you'll have access to that. And then the badges and certificates will be sent to you in the next few weeks, so be sure to be on the lookout for that. And also, if you like the structure of how our event went today, this is how we do our On the Horizon virtual series every month. Our next series topic is focused on competition from new models of learning, which is certainly really relevant to what we're talking about today, and that is on December 3rd at 10 a.m. Central, and it's the same way. It's a panel discussion, and we bring in people from all different sectors of the NMC, and of course, librarians are one of them. And then also, if you're around DC next June, you can join us at our face-to-face. We'd love to actually see you face-to-face and continue the conversation. In Washington, DC, at our summer conference, June 9th through 11th. So without further ado, I'm going to go ahead and say it is an exciting time to be in the library space, and I heard that today. And we look forward to engaging in further discussion with you later on. So everybody have a terrific day, evening, and we hope to see you again soon in the NMC community. Thank you.